So I'm currently looking through every real estate portal in the entire world for the second time this year. Don't ask why. But one big thing that I'm noticing is that real estate portals out there still need a lot of help with their user experience and with the quality of their listings, quite frankly. A lot of you out there could stand to talk to our sponsor, PropTex. That's PropTex with 2 X's, for things like real-time renovation estimates, virtual staging, even seamless furniture shopping on the portal. If that sounds like a good idea to you, get in touch with our sponsor, PropTex with 2 X's. Hit the guys up on LinkedIn or head to proptexwith2x's.com and, obviously say that we sent you. Hello and welcome to the PPW pod, bringing you news, views and interviews from the world of real estate marketplaces and PropTech. Joined today by Simon Baker. How are you, Simon?
Good afternoon. I'm great and on time, just for clarity's sake.
Fair enough. And also joined by Max Steinman, all the way from Canada. How are you, Max?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So I interviewed you actually before we started calling this a podcast back in 2022. I don't know how many of our listeners today will have caught that particular interview. So for anybody who didn't see that interview, would you very quickly give us an overview of what RentSync does?
For sure. Yeah, RentSync's the leading provider of marketing solutions to the rental housing industry in the Canadian market. That's the very, very quick answer, but we basically handle everything from a marketing perspective for multifamily landlords and property management companies in Canada, including we're the leading ILS or portal network in Canada for rental housing.
ILS.
Yeah, that was my question as well.
ILS. I've not heard that one. I've heard MLS.
ILS. Internet listing site.
Oh, internet listing. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you guys call them portals, which sounds way cooler in Europe and everywhere else. It kind of sounds like you go into a portal and into another dimension. We're much more boring and call them internet listing sites.
That's Canada for you. Okay. Now, Ed, a quick question. What was it that Malcolm Myers called the sites? He had a great name for them as well. Remember?
DAPs, dominant advertising portals.
There you go. You could be a DAP as well, because you can be an ILS.
I don't mind being a DAP.
Yeah. But I know that might actually be the new phrase. Now, the other question I had for you was you said marketing solutions. Now, I'm really keen to explore what that means. You know, it sounds far more than just the ILS.
For sure.
Yeah, a lot more products and services behind that.
Well, the marketplace or ILS or DAP solution obviously has its marketing connotation. It's where housing providers meet rental prospects ultimately. So it plays a big role in that. But the company actually, when it was founded in 2010, started as a website development shop for multifamily housing providers in Canada. So, the marketing journey started there, where we've got in North America, large scale enterprise real estate investment trusts, landlords, property management companies, oftentimes who have, much more than 1,000 units, all the way up to, in Canada, 70, 80,000 units under management under one company. And these multifamily providers have their own websites. Think of it kind of like there's the Expedias of the world and Booking.coms of the world, which are, more universal marketplaces. And then there's also the Air Canadas of the world, British Airways of the world, that have their own websites. So we started on that end of it. We built software as well to manage those websites for property managers could manage their own CMS and also send out their listings via that software to the marketplaces at the same time, get analytics back on how each of those marketplaces DApps were performing and make marketing spend decisions, even buy their advertising through our platform. And then in more recent years, sort of continuing down funnel, we have an entire CRM now for leasing professionals that allows essentially a property management firm to go all the way from that lead coming in all the way through to signing a lease. So going through, the prospect back and forth communication, booking a tour at the property, applying online all the way through to signing a lease, moving that resident in, and even resident management, which is a little less marketing solutions, but still, you're able to market services and also manage the actual resident throughout the resident lifecycle. Including renewals.
So, Max, I'm keen to understand. You said you started in 2010 building websites for these companies, right? How does a company go from building websites to, I'm assuming, the number one rentals portals operator in Canada? I know that when I interviewed last time back in 2022, RentSync had just done quite a lot of transactions. Can you kind of give our listeners some perspective of how you've gone from 2010 building websites to 2025 owning a huge network of portals, ILSs, and this whole ecosystem that you're talking about there?
Yeah, a lot of it is just ambition, but we really started. We had a really good position in the market to start from. Being a website development company was actually a really good medium for us to build and grow off of, because we really were the only major provider of that service, at least in the Canadian market at the time. So we amassed a considerable amount of market share in just being the de facto go-to website development company. We had most of the major property management firms using our platform to manage their websites. It's quite a niche space, so there weren't 30, 40 competitors trying to build rental websites at the time. And then because we had all those units, and we kind of had we were more the truth of rental data and content than just about kind of anyone else out there. We had all the photos, we had all the pricing, we had all the units, and property descriptions. The next natural question that many of our customers were asking at that time was, how do I connect to the marketplaces? I have this source of truth website. It's generating lots of leads for us. Tenants and prospective residents are interacting with it every day. How do I get my ILS, marketplace advertising, to match up with these websites? And so we formed basically a simple software solution. We called it listing syndication back in the day, to just basically connect out to each of those listing sites. And then by kind of being in that position where we were connecting thousands and thousands of properties on a daily basis to tens of listing sites, and collecting all the data to see what was working and what wasn't, we had a very strong idea of which listing sites looked like they were going to be the biggest part of the future in the Canadian market. And we used that opportunity to, as you said, do a roll-up strategy in the Canadian market. Targeted 6 specific sites that were more regional at the time, and brought them together as a national network. And then through there, the company significantly took off at that point. It was quite a fragmented ILS market in Canada, which meant really low amount of resources going into each of these different marketplace businesses. We're talking, many of the leading portals only having 5 employees, 2 employees. Maybe the one at the most scale had about 16 or 17, which was rentals.ca, which is now our flagship listing brand that we did acquire in that that crazy 6-month series of acquisitions. And then, by bringing them all together, we could share resources, invest further, and sort of defragment the market. which was beneficial to us, of course, but also kind of beneficial to renters and beneficial to professional property management companies and landlords who were looking for a more sophisticated long-term network solution.
I got a question about that. You said it was a crazy 6 months. How many businesses did you acquire in that time?
6.
6 in 6 months.
6 major domains. I think it was 5 because one came with sort of 2, which was rentals.ca and a site called Toronto Rentals. But yeah, we acquired rentfaster.ca and .com, which is the largest listing site in the Alberta market, specifically in Calgary, which is a huge rental market. We acquired louer.ca, which literally translates to rent.ca in French for the Quebec market. RentCanada.com, which is more regional at the time to the Winnipeg and Manitoba market, and a few others. So we really focused on picking up these specifically strong in certain region marketplaces, as well as that national brand, rentals.ca. We had to get each of those entrepreneurs who had started those listing sites or growing those listing sites kind of on side with the strategy of this roll up. It wasn't just like one after another. Like it was sort of done together, in a roll up kind of very transparent and forward strategy with each of those business owners.
So what's been when you're having been through many M&A transactions and the acquisition bit's the easiest bit, the merger bit is the hardest bit in putting it all together. I'm curious, how do you go about bringing together these 6 different sites so that I assume you have one platform and you have one team who's thinking about it? How did you approach all of that and do it in a way that was fast, efficient, and delivered a lot of value for your advertisers?
Yeah, I think we learned a lot of lessons along the way. We're not perfect, but the first thing that we focus on, because in many of these situations, it was also a talent acquisition. Like we were bringing on, talented engineering teams, talented managers, people with a lot of wealth of knowledge within this industry for years and years. In some cases, really talented customer support folks. And so the very first thing that we focused on is just melding the company cultures together and making sure that culturally speaking, and from a team perspective, that everyone felt like they were part of RentSync, because ultimately they were now, and that we were one team. And that's like the simple. I mean, it's not simple. It sounds simple, but means flying people into our head office in Toronto, making sure that we have a lot of events, making sure that we're communicating really well during all hands meetings, and taking the time, especially in a remote work environment, to really focus on building company culture and setting goals together. So that was really the first thing that I think is necessary when you're doing any sort of integration of companies. The next thing that we focused on really was immediate synergies that could be derived from usually like sales and marketing. And it takes a lot of pressure off the integration if you can start to see those synergies early on. A lot of cross-sell opportunities, marketing opportunities to help immediately sort of kickstart and build on ultimately the sales. And when you're able to increase sales in a shorter period of time, you can reinvest a little bit with a little bit more confidence and faster. And then, from a technical perspective, that's actually some of the most challenging part of it is, getting the technical integrations down and building a cohesive platform. So we always kind of have done it in that order of operations, all equally important. But I think like the order is important because if you don't get the team working together and on side, you just face so much friction down the road. So it's a bit of a leadership exercise, to be honest. And all of our leaders
can imagine.
be locked in on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. I just want to explore this a bit further, because when you talk to people about M&A, they always paint a very good story about things that have gone right, and how you outlined that process, I think is spot on, right? It's very obvious. You've got to win the hearts and minds, get everyone working towards the same outcome. And if they do that, then everything else sort of becomes much easier in that process. What went wrong? What are the 2 or 3 lessons that you can look back on and go, oh, yeah, we should have done that differently?
Yeah, great question. I think it's more on the actual technical integration end. I think it's just maybe not what went wrong, but what our assumptions were going into each model, and how long like the technical integration side would take versus how long in reality it takes. So I would just say, we had this idea that we acquired 6 listing sites in 6 months, and within another 6 months, everything from a technical perspective would be buttoned up. And we would have kind of redeveloped our marketplace engine with each site running off that engine. And in a bubble, maybe that would be possible, but we also just had our existing business that we were running that was at pretty good scale as well. So I think, probably just the expectation around technical integration, and being more realistic in that situation, which also has a bit of a feedback loop to the whole company culture and team motivation. So I just think it's important not to underestimate how intense the technical lift is to bring together companies on different tech stacks and with different engineering teams.
Do you have one tech stack now? So it's everyone operates on. There's one tech stack for the ILS part of the business.
Almost.
Almost.
Yeah. I mean, it's also kind of like there's front end and there's back end, and we've got a lot further on the back end, surprisingly, than we have on the front, because we kind of realized all these sites, UI, UX wise, similar in nature, but there's sort of less of an impact of changing a front end than there is operationally as a back end. So we actually just focus much more on the back, but we are going through, still some of the kind of final processes of bringing consistency to the front end side, which is just a little bit less of a priority ultimately in the end.
So when you're finished, you'll have, correct me if I'm getting this wrong, you'll have one series of front ends, because you've got all the different brands that I assume you've maintained in each of the markets because of their history and their legacy and the value that's in them. You'll have behind them a consistent tech stack. So basically they all function the same way from a user perspective. And then behind that, your underlying advertiser platform will be one platform for the country, I assume. Just 2 languages.
Pretty much. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, bang on. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Max, I want to discuss the Canadian market a little bit with you, because I've actually been researching it last week a little bit, and it struck me as very interesting. It's an interesting market for a few reasons. We've touched on the regionality a little bit and how, you've got thousands of miles between different regions, you've got different languages and all the rest of it. I'm also kind of interested in the business models. So perhaps more on the sales side, it is a country with some kind of odd business models with the portal. So I'm thinking of like realtor.ca doesn't really generate revenue per se. It's kind of this agent association thing where everyone just kind of pays their dues. I imagine there isn't a similar model like that in rentals, but where I'm going with this is I would imagine that a lot of the big ILS operators, the big portal operators south of the border, are looking at Canada and thinking, if we invest a little bit here, we can make a lot of money. What is the situation with regards to companies like Zillow and CoStar? I imagine, I'm assuming, but I don't know, I imagine apartments.com is actually quite a big competitor of yours right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. To speak to Realtor.ca first, it is kind of unique in that it's the main, realtor or realty portal in Canada, especially for sale on the for sale side, which we don't compete on the for sale side. And it is sort of unique that it's owned by the Canadian Real Estate Association, which could be advantageous to them, could be disadvantageous, to them, in the future. Zillow is attempting to compete on the for sale side now a little bit, and take on Realtor.ca. Less so
but hasn't Zillow been there for quite a while? Like, at least probably a decade?
Not a decade. I want to say maybe half a decade, about 5 years of attempting
5 years.
It's really difficult to knock off Realtor.ca because it's free, sort of embedded fee. In a way, it's sort of an embedded fee into agent fees ultimately that they pay into CREA and into their individual boards. But it kind of comes off as free. It's included, call it. So yeah, it's very difficult to knock off that brand. Like, everyone in Canada knows that brand. So I'm sure that's pretty challenging. In the rental space, which is far more wide open, it's not that realtors don't do rentals in Canada, but they really only do a small portion of the informal rental market. And so it's a lot more wide open for sort of competition. We had, a very similar, I would say, to probably Europe and the rest of the world, in that the top portals were mostly classified sites. If you look back, 15 years ago, to maybe even 7-8 years ago, there was this dominant stretch of even sites like Craigslist and Kijiji being, the top portals because they had the brand recognition, and then we sort of formalized marketplaces with Rentals.ca's network. And yeah, there's been some increased competition for sure from south of the border. Zillow is still more focused on the for sale side, but they're here. And then, yeah, Apartments.com and CoStar has been in the market now for, I want to say, about 3 years, and is starting to build up more traffic and a little bit of a sales team as well. So we do come across them quite a bit more often. They're probably our main competitor at this point.
Okay. The other kind of thing that struck me about the Canadian market is just how prevalent, or how, the percentage of what we in the UK would call build to rent, which you guys call multifamily. Is there much of a kind of a private landlord market in Canada? And if so, do you serve it? Is it even worth serving? And kind of how much do you benefit from the kind of professionalization and standardization of the market being, build to rent, as opposed to all these tiny little mom and pop landlords?
Yeah, I'll throw one more jargon or term similarity. UK built to rent. Our actual technical jargon for built to rent that like the government would use, or CMHC, which is the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, is purpose-built rentals. So it's actually kind of similar to the UK, but you don't hear that a lot, from folks like us. We tend to say multifamily or property managers. So yeah, you'll notice that also I would say rental housing providers, because we do serve the mom and pop or the informal or the private landlord as well. There's interesting parallel between the European market and the Canadian market that's actually probably more prevalent in comparison in comparing when you're talking about Canada versus the US to Europe, which is that we have a significant portion of our housing stock, especially our newer housing stock, like the last 20 years, are condominium developments, also known as strata. And these condominiums, like in Toronto, as an example, more than 50% of the condominiums, which were not built to rent. They were mainly built for the purpose of home ownership or buying, were actually purchased by investors, and those investors ultimately, put them on the rental market most of the time, or were speculating, and purchasing the unit with the hopes of reselling it within a couple of years, because the Canadian real estate market was on such a tear for about 2 decades. And so most of those investor units actually end up in the rental stock, but as you kind of call them, privately or informally, they still need to rent them out. So some use a realtor in cities like Toronto and Vancouver, where they're more competitive markets. You'll see that a little bit more. So those units end up on realtor.ca sometimes. Most, though, use either a property management company that is sort of more set up to handle individual units and individual buildings, or they'll just manage the property themselves, the unit themselves, and they post to rentals.ca, which they can do directly. They don't have to do through software. They can literally just go on to rentals.ca and get a free listing. There's also some paid options, but it is a freemium model. So we do actually more of our listings come from the private market or the informal market than they do from the professionalized property management company, just because of the sheer volume. Like it's 70-30 in the Canadian market, which is 70% of the units of all of the rental stock are actually owned by investors with less than 10 units, whereas only 30% are sort of those more multifamily professionalized management companies. Now, that's kind of where we make our bread and butter, but the other portion of the market is huge. That is also shifting right now. There's almost no condominium developments going on across the country. The real estate market's changed substantially, and most of the cranes you see in the sky in Toronto, Vancouver, now Montreal, are purpose-built rental projects. Really, they're the only projects that pencil currently, and so that segment of the market, which is our bread and butter, is growing as a proportion of the overall real estate market.
Okay, I have a question related to a post that I put on LinkedIn the other day. I was referencing ImmoScout24 in Germany and the fact that they have this product where they monetize the end user. So they, if you're looking for somewhere to rent in Germany, you can pay the portal to basically get a whole bunch of premium features. Now, they've made a whole load of money over this. And my post on LinkedIn was basically saying, I don't understand why other leading rental portal operators don't do this. I'm now talking to a leading rental portal operator who can tell me, why don't other portals do this? Is it just a question of, in Canada, maybe the kind of demand to supply ratio isn't quite there to do it? Or what are your thoughts about monetizing end users with a kind of premium product like that?
My thoughts would be check our roadmap and ask back in maybe 8 to 10 months.
Okay, is this an exclusive we're getting here?
No, it's something that's been on our radar for a couple of years. I actually, and I know one of the questions you're probably going to ask me is, why are we interested? Why do we come to Property Portal Watch in Europe? It is to lend ideas and exchange ideas with other leading providers in the market, right? So, I've actually talked to folks based out of the Netherlands. Treehouse, I think, also has the same model where they monetize the end user for like a small fee. Now, we absolutely are never going to go down the route of like a required payment to be an end user to search rentals.ca. But there are some opportunities for a premium product there. And you can think around things like rent reporting, which can allow renters the ability to post their rentals and have them count as part of their credit. which is something that in the past in Canada hasn't been possible. But the government is looking to make that possible so that renters can build credit from being on time payers. So things that can be beneficial to renters, premium search features, the ability to set up premium notifications, or instantly apply via a renter profile. Those sorts of things is kind of where we're looking. And it's somewhat in infancy, but it's definitely most likely a route that we'll go down in the next year or two.
Okay, so do you do things like, because one of the challenges renters face around the world is continuously filling out application forms, okay, and continuing having, basically it's the same form from different people, and they do it 100 times. Have you thought about doing like rental passports where you literally can take it from, you almost put the RentSync brand behind the passport. So if someone is RentSync approved, they are a pretty good option as a renter.
Basically, you have to be really careful legislatively not to take on sort of the liability of approving or unapproving, or putting a renter in a favored position, because if you're doing that, you're potentially discriminating against others. And in the housing space, like any level of perceived discrimination is like a big problem legislatively. So I don't think we'll get to the point of like pre-approving anyone. Like we always want to put that on the landlord ultimately. But to your point, having a standardized application process, that's super beneficial to the renter, because they don't need to do it over and over again, which we would call just like a renter profile, is certainly a direction we're already like heading or have components of that. But certainly standardizing that. Only difference in sort of the strategy that you described is we would do it under the rentals.ca brand. I mean, that's the renter specific brand that everyone knows in Canada. Like that's where we're doing brand advertising and taking the boards of hockey games and doing big national sponsorships. Whereas like RentSync is more of the B2B brand that our multifamily landlords and professional property management companies know as a software and solutions provider. So, yeah.
I have a question. Actually, I have a question from Harvey, who, when we said that we were interviewing you today, he recalled your presentation from last year's PropTech and Portal Watch, and he wants an update on what you guys were talking about on stage. So you were talking about how you leverage the media to win traffic, and Harvey and I were talking a little bit, and we're kind of interested to know if and how you measure relationships that RentSync have with the media and kind of what goes into building them. I imagine that being founded all the way back in 2010 kind of helps here, right?
Yeah, somewhat. Honestly, we didn't get a lot of media coverage till we acquired, the portals. The portals are super interesting to the media because we are usually the best source of truth on real-time data around asking rents or advertised rents in the country. So we put together a rent report monthly from rentals.ca that incorporates data across our whole network. And this is sort of our most important content piece that we get out there. And we blast it out to an entire audience of journalists across the country, usually picking up as a result of that rent report, 200 to 300 major media mentions quarterly in a lot of the major newspapers, publications, online publications, podcasts. And we have a small but mighty media team here that takes interview requests all month long following the release of that rent report. It helps that we're a very Canadian brand as well. Like it just, really lends to the fact that Canadian journalists and the Canadian media really like to support Canadian brands. So it's not like we don't have competition in that space.
Is this a reference to one of your, let's say, American competitors? Do they also have a rental, let's say, index or whatever that they try and push as well, that you're kind of competing with, not only in terms of for traffic for the portals, but also for kind of influence in the media? Are you saying that maybe US brands trying to do that don't get the cut through right now because of the, let's say, political situation in Canada?
What political situation? I think there's some part of that. I mean, like, we've also just built those relationships. Like, that takes a lot of time as well. But I like to think that, you know, A, we're a .ca, which our competitors are not. But B, like, we've been at it for a very long time building those relationships. And it's more than just, hey, here's the rent report for the month. Like, we hold events for the media, and we really try to get them involved. We support them. We're as quick as possible to their requests. But I think, yeah, being Canadian helps. I think it helps with our main user base as well, which is renters themselves. And yeah, there is this political climate right now. I actually heard a radio ad yesterday. You're going to say, why were you listening to the radio? I still listen to the radio. I was listening on the way home from our summer cabin or our cottage to the NBA finals last night. And the radio ad was, I think it was a Government of Canada radio ad. I'm not sure because it didn't say it at the end, but it was literally just like, buy made in Canada, buy manufactured in Canada products. And I don't think that that sentiment doesn't extend to service-based businesses or to online-based businesses. I think just about everyone in Canada right now, as a consumer, is looking to support Canadian businesses, given that Canadian businesses are a little bit under attack from south of the border, and we don't really appreciate that.
You got to watch out for those Mexicans, haven't you?
No, there are allies, and they didn't start this either.
Yeah. So overall, how is the business going? I mean, you've gone through this process. You've aggregated these sites. You've created the leading ILS platform within Canada. You've got an amazing back end system that seamlessly links in to the front end and handles leads generated at the back end. And you're forever adding more functionality to that, so that you go deeper and deeper down the value chain. So overall, how is the business going? Is it profitable? Is it growing fast? Yeah, what's the overall economic picture look like?
Growing fast, profitable. It's and like size, scale wise, in terms of employees, we've significantly scaled.
How many employees do you have?
We're at about 120 as of yesterday, and probably will add another 20 to 25 within the next year to year and a half. Yeah, super strong growth, and yeah, super well positioned. I'm not sure if you guys saw the announcement, but we did take on a major growth equity investment somewhat recently, and from a company called Silversmith Capital Partners. And so that's only going to kind of help us be a little bit more aggressive, reinvest some of our profit back into the business, perhaps be a little less efficient, but prioritize some key items on our roadmap over the next 2 to 3 years to actually kind of J-curve our growth even further into the future. So really excited about that opportunity, and kind of working with Silversmith to really set up the company nicely over the next kind of decade for additional or for continued scale and growth, really, because we don't have a scale and growth issue. It's just you need to think out, obviously, 5 to 7 years as to how you're going to continue to kind of keep that up.
Yeah. The other thing I'd like to explore a bit is how do you think about AI? How do you think about its application to the business? And equally, how do you think about its potential threat to the business?
Yeah, great question. I mean, we think about all those things. First of all, I think the most immediate impact that AI could have to the portal business is where we get our traffic from. And there's a number of terms for this, but call it AEO, which we're starting to see more and more traffic come from, ChatGPT and Gemini, but it's still a very, very small portion of our overall organic traffic.
Here's an interesting thing. I was talking to a company this morning based out of where are they? Singapore or Thailand, and we're looking at sources of traffic. And number one was Google SEO. Number two was ChatGPT. But ChatGPT was literally 30% of the size of the SEO traffic. It was a material chunk.
Yeah.
Material chunk. And they're in a more of a back end play rather than a front end ILS play. And so they're more B2B. But what they've discovered is that the agents and developers who are looking for their sort of software are using, but it's a marketing tool, are using ChatGPT to find them, and they are turning up in that search. So I think the world is moving quite quickly in the direction of AI-driven search rather than the traditional Google-driven search.
Yeah, I might mess this up, but I think Google recorded, I think it was last quarter, they actually had their first decline in traffic. It was either a month-over-month decline in traffic for the first time in basically their history, or quarter-over-quarter. I can't remember, but I think that speaks to it. Obviously, people are starting their online search in a different place now, or some people are. And I think it's also important when it comes to Google to understand that Gemini is very, very well positioned as well, and that probably Google's main page and Gemini will kind of just merge over time to become one product. Yeah. So, this concept of kind of AEO is becoming, of increasing importance to us, and our investment into it and the way we look at it from a strategic standpoint and a technical standpoint is certainly, kind of taking us by storm and is a huge new focus for us. Can be a big opportunity.
But how do you think about it? I mean, because I was chatting to Mike Vanderheiden, who runs Portal Ventures, and his whole life is SEO optimization of classified sites, in whether it's cars, jobs, homes. He does a whole bunch of stuff, fashion, so. And we're having a good old conversation literally last week, and he was saying, look, the problem he's got is he gets great analytics from Google. He gets nothing from the AI driven search, and so he's trying to work out how he's trying to do that back engineering of how does a site really optimize itself for AI driven search rather than from traditional Google SEO.
It's a lot of testing going on right now, because really, if you think about where we're at in the journey, we're in the infancy stage, right? We really are. This is early days. I know, for early days, there's still billions of users now using these large language models, but in terms of how businesses and marketplaces interact with these models and share sort of the value chain in the search, these are really early days. I can say for sure, we're not anywhere near 30%. I don't even think we're at 2% of our traffic coming from ChatGPT.
Just for clarity, this was if Google was 60%, then ChatGPT was
30%
30% of the 60%, which is 18%. But I think between the two of them, it was I'll get this number about right, was about 65% overall of their traffic. So it was roughly 15% was coming from ChatGPT, or I think it was the bucket was AI, but primarily ChatGPT.
Right. I mean, although it sounds boring, the most obvious way to sort of hedge against the risk side of it, which is, okay, well, what if you don't have good AEO, or what if you're not going to pick up the same proportional traffic out of an LLM as you are, currently out of Google, is to just invest in your brand. And we're lucky that we're at a scale in Canada where we're already doing that, but we're going to double down on that. So ultimately, I want folks to just say, hey, like, I'm looking for an apartment, I'm going to rentals.ca, then go anywhere else. I think, I've seen a few presentations on the impact of, ChatGPT across many different industries. I think vertically integrated industries like what we're in will certainly take a lot longer to become sort of impacted by the regular kind of day-to-day user than horizontal businesses. But it doesn't mean that this wave of change isn't here and isn't coming. Right now, it still is content is king. Like, we focus on listing acquisition and focus on having the largest amount of listings in the Canadian market from both the small mom and pop landlords, private marketplace businesses, as well as the enterprise side and even the realtor side. And at the end of the day, the most important thing to any user, and we've tested this over and over and over by just simply asking our users in feedback surveys, what is the most important thing about a marketplace for rentals? It's to have the most listings, because when you're conducting that search, and by now it's pretty de facto that there's going to be a map view, there's going to be a list view, there's going to be filters. There are some sites that are better than others in those categories, but the most important thing, hands down, is that you're not missing any inventory when you're conducting your search, or that you don't have to go to 2 or 3 sites. And so, we're going to continue to just focus on that, because I think, that's probably going to help us massively on the ChatGPT side as that becomes a larger and larger proportional generation of our traffic. But that's the type of thing that also continues to reinforce your brand and have people come directly to you. And so, that's kind of how we see continuing to offset some of that risk. We also see it as an opportunity, though. Like, I mean, if we do well in AEO, like, we're going to get a lot of traffic, and we have been getting the most traffic out of AEO compared to our competitors at this point in the Canadian rental market.
Do you guys, I'm interested because you guys are, obviously you run real estate portals, but you're not the traditional real estate portal company in that the website is kind of first and foremost. You do have this suite of other offerings, marketing, et cetera, Are there any use cases that you guys have of AI that you think perhaps other real estate portal operators out there don't have? I'm interested, like, somebody listening to this might go, oh, actually, that's a good idea that we hadn't thought of using AI for example. Like, personally, I'm kind of sick to death at this point of everyone saying, oh, we use AI to help our agents write better descriptions. Like, is there anything more novel that you guys are doing with it?
We were the first to do that.
Okay, all right.
but it's sure, it's boring at this point to help them write more descriptions. We use it a lot actually behind the scenes, operationally, and improving the content and the data that we ingest, and to basically create a higher quality shadow table of data, which then feeds into our data and analytics business. Something I haven't talked about a lot, but we run basically like a joint venture partnership in Canada with a company called Urban Nation. And we're in 4 major cities now in Canada, where you've essentially got this commercial realty database that where you can find historical asking rents, and information on basically projects in those cities, used by real estate developers, used by analysts, and we use AI to improve that data set behind the scenes, which also helps to improve things like our monthly rent report, which the media picks up, and gives us that competitive edge from that standpoint. So our data team uses it. Outside of that, we aren't investing heavily at this point in like AI agents or bots. We just think at this point, there are a lot of companies doing it, pouring a lot of money in. And already we've seen that some have sort of burnt out, went down the wrong path. The moment, renters are still using portals in a pretty traditional way. And I think it's very difficult to go out and predict the future of how and what is going to take off. If you invest a ton of money, we've seen portals who built their own custom GPTs about a year and a half ago. That led to nothing, literally nothing. But they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars of engineering time, in some cases, maybe millions of dollars of engineering time doing that. And that's a perfect example of, hey, like, don't go blow a tire right now on something that you don't know is going to shake out when 95% of, maybe higher of user behavior and traffic has not changed. And when it changes, we'll know. And then we have to react quickly and maybe acquire a company, maybe partner with a company, or build ourselves at that point. So just to be nimble. But right now, for pretty good reason, nothing's changed. Portal businesses are portal businesses.
Have we changed your language, by the way? You're saying portal now instead of ILS. I remember the first time I interviewed you, it was ILS, and I felt very awkward having to ask you what an ILS was.
I think, honestly, after like 10 minutes of chatting with you guys, I always switch back to portal. Like when I'm at your event in Spain or wherever it's going to be next time. I get back on the portal train, but it had been too long, so I defaulted back to ILS. So my apologies. I'll stick to portal going forward.
And, yeah, that's okay. And the good news is it is the Property Portal Watch conference, and it is going to be in Madrid, and it's going to be the 13th to 15th of October this year. So, Max, I hope you do actually pack the bag and come on over and
I'll be there.
Spend. We're going to have 400 plus this year. It'll be a bigger audience again because
nice.
Registrations are looking fantastic.
Yeah, I love going to the event, and for that exact reason that we sort of talked about earlier, which is if you don't go, and there really isn't a similar event for our industry anywhere else in the world. Like if you don't go, you can't pick up on new ideas and learn from your peers who are, in most cases, non-competitive to us. So we share ideas. I usually have like 3 or 4 really, really good takeaways from each event. And so, yeah, I'll be in Madrid. Plus, hot take, I actually like Madrid more than Barcelona as a city. So happy to hear it's in Madrid again. And both cities have direct flights from Toronto. So always appreciate that.
Wonderful. Okay, Max, we will leave it there on that completely unprompted testimonial for us. Thank you so much for talking to us. And I guess we'll see you in the autumn.
Absolutely. Sounds good. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Max. Great to see you.